Hey everyone, Pastor Ryan here from Albert Lee Assembly of God. So thankful that you enjoyed our previous video. Had a lot of reception in there, our community and addictions. And so we, like I said, that one was part one, and this is part two. And so we are excited that you are coming back and watching this other entry. As much as there's interest, we'll see what happens with these. And I want to apologize. Some of you were looking for this last week, and it took a while. And part of that reason is because the releasing of these is dependent upon other schedules and editing and such and whatnot. And but we are so thankful that you have been patient and that you are enjoying these discussions. Again, these are raw and for the most part unfiltered. I do try to catch certain words because I know that we have such a wide demographic that is watching these videos, and I want to be mindful of young ears where we can. And but again, thank you so much, and I hope that you enjoy this entry. Thank you.
All right. Well, so we're back with another discussion. For those of you that watched the previous video, thank you so much for joining us for this one as well. And this one won't be as long, but we still want to make sure that we have a really fruitful time with everything going on. Like to kind of start this discussion today around the origins, not necessarily the origins of addiction, but just how does addiction start in our lives. And so with your knowledge and your experience, I'm sure that you've heard many different accounts of how does that monster get born, if you will, in people's lives.
Well, all right. Well, first I kind of wanted to say something about last week a little bit. I just want to touch real quick. I just wanted to say that it seems to me like the best way to get through to an addict is through another addict who's in recovery. And you know, and as far as the recovery process goes, like you know, there's the like the programs that they have,
right?
You know, treatment and stuff like that. That all works, you know, and I want to make sure that that's, you know, put in this because it does work. It's just our goal, obviously, is can we get that process started earlier? Well, and how do we open that conversation?
Yeah. So and even to kind of piggyback on that too, because this is why, you know, like I was saying earlier, in Revelations, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb, by that spiritual connection, by Jesus. But then there's a conjunction and the word of our testimony. Right. So there's something about that shared experience that when we share our testimonies, we share our journeys, that it helps other people who might be in similar situations. Right. And then there's testimonies that your experiences, what you've gone through, is going to impact somebody's life where mine might not have that same reach.
Right.
And so that's an important component for sure.
Right. So okay. So as far as an origin goes, I'll give you a brief idea as far as my my use, and obviously mine is different than everyone else's, but I think that okay, so my mom told me that when I was 6 months old, she had to get rid of her babysitter because the babysitter that I had was when I'd start crying or things like that, would decide to give me alcohol.
Oh man.
You know? So I have to wonder if maybe at that point, you know, because as a kid like that, you're processing life, you're learning all this stuff. So I part of me wonders if that wasn't where the beginning of my addiction started, because it's like, okay, well, I'm having a hard time. You give me this, I take a nap.
So
I enjoy the, you know, I don't know what I enjoyed because I don't remember it.
Right.
You know, but
at that foundational age.
Right.
As the mind is being formed and as your body is growing in that very, very early age, it's like, hey, we're going to throw in and we're going to put in this little program in you and say, hey,
this is
you will need this.
Right. And this you know is your solution. Mm-hmm. But so you know, and then I grew up in a family that drank a lot. Mm-hmm. It was acceptable. that would have been more on my mother's side. On my father's side, it was like smoking weed and some other stuff, you know. So at an early age, even when I was a kid, back then taking a kid to the bar wasn't such a big deal.
Right.
You know, a lot of people did it, and so I would go with them, and I'd drink here and there, and it never really was anything, I don't think, at that point. But when I started using like different drugs, it was early teens, is when I really kind of started on that. And more or less it was just I was having some fun. I was having fun. I thought it was cool.
Right.
But then I also look at it and I realized that there was I didn't feel like my family cared, respected, loved me, because I had been pushed around from different family members to totally different areas, schools all over the place, and nobody really took a real interest in me as a child. I don't think that it was purposely done.
Right.
Like I don't feel like they were like, oh, well, we just don't want this kid. It was more, they had other things going on. They had adult things going on, and I didn't understand that.
The absent-mindedness of, hey, this project's happening over here. It needs my attention. Oh yeah, I forgot he's over here.
Right. So I think there was a part of me that was also feeling this little gap early on. This is something that was missing within me, and I think I got into my late teens, early 20s, and it was still more just partying, kind of, just kind of having fun, doing it on the weekends, sometimes during the week, but I look back now and I think even at that point I was in addiction, because we have a tendency to think that there's like these parameters around what addiction could be. Well, somebody who's using every weekend and that's what their weekend is could very well be an addict, or an alcoholic, and they're not looking at it like that because they're like, well, I just do it on the weekends, or I just do it here, and that's one of the problems I think that that the people around you and yourself tend to trick yourself about, is that we think, well, at least I'm not this bad. At least I'm not this bad. And then you get to that point, it's like, well, at least I'm not this, and at least not this. And so I don't really know at what point it turned from being just, having fun or doing whatever to where suddenly I was in addiction, because I think it really sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
And so in my early 20s and stuff, that's really when I started to get into the drugs, and it was, God, I don't know how to, it wasn't like I thought to myself, first of all, I never thought to myself, I can't wait to be an addict. I can't wait to be on this.
No one asked that stuff. I'm going to be an addict today.
Right.
It doesn't happen.
That was never, but I always knew that there was something missing inside of me. So there's a little bit of, correlation or whatever you want to say, in that, where I knew that I was missing something. And I knew that I was trying to fill it with something that was unhealthy.
Right.
And, but I also was on the other side where, well, everybody else is having fun with this. Everybody else is doing this. I just wanted to be liked. I just wanted to be cool. I just wanted to have fun. And then there became a certain point where I remember the first time that I actually like sat at home and drank by myself. And I thought, God, this is sad. But it occurred to me that, so I had this parameter on alcohol,
Right.
Well, you drink with everybody else.
Right.
But when it came to drugs, that wasn't the case. Right. it was like acceptable for me to wake up and get high. Right. You know, I didn't really think much about it. Well, here the whole time I was doing that, but when I drank, it was like, God, this is sad. Well, guess what? You know, it was sad that I was doing it every, you know, at a certain point it became every day.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that when I got into an everyday kind of routine with using drugs or alcohol, you know, or which, by the way, I see alcohol as a drug.
Oh yeah, no, and I agree with you on that. Okay. It's to me it's both an entry drug and an ending drug, in my opinion, with its effects. And so I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, I kind of I was doing it every day, and you know, I knew that was a problem.
Right.
You know, and there was this process that went on in my head. Well, you know, it was more like I tried to justify what I was doing, you know, and I was functionable for quite some time. You know, I functioned fairly well. I still worked. I still maintained a life. You know, and so it was hard for me at that point to be like, well, you know, I got this problem.
Right. Because in your mind, just based on what I'm hearing here, is at that point, it wasn't a problem because you were still functioning.
Right.
You're like, I've got it under control. You know, whether it's these hours during the day or on weekends.
That's a good way to put it. I felt like I still had control.
Yeah.
Even though I look back now and I think, no, you know, I didn't really have that control.
When you look back now from that recovered mindset, like, oh, yeah, oops.
Yeah, you know, so it kind of is where I was trying to trick myself, I think, or something. I don't know, you know, but I never really dealt with everything from the past. So it just seemed like the less I dealt with, the more I piled on the drugs, because it was like, well, I just need to cover this up. I need to cover this up. I need to cover this up, you know, and then it got to a point where I wasn't quite so functionable, and so I wasn't necessarily employable. Well, then you start turning into how do I hustle?
Right.
You know, I'm going to sell drugs, you know, or I'm going to steal from somebody.
I can't hold a regular job.
So I have to do what I have to do.
I will do what I can to survive, which means, hey, I've got access to drugs, I'll sell these. Or I have, I can break into so-and-so's house and get this. Or I can go and do that. And it again, kind of maybe jumping off of where we went last week with just how it begins to control your life in that sense, because
it's a circle.
It is a circle.
It spins itself.
Yeah, well, because like you were saying, like, you went from a place where, yes, I had control over it, or you know, I thought I had control over it. Right. It was not an issue. Please, if you're listening, you're not going to see the air quotes, but please see I had control, and so you were able to function again. Air quotes, please. And then that broke down, and then you're not noticing, at least my perspective. You don't be
gradual. It can
be gradual, so you don't see that loss of control. And that's why we're doing the air quotes, because there was no control in the beginning. But you go from this place where, like, okay, now I don't have a job, and so it's like, okay, well, in order for me just to live, I gotta pay rent, I gotta pay the bill, I gotta get gas in the car. So in order to make money, I'm gonna do these side things here because I know I can get something from it.
So, and just to kind of give you full view, I have spent approximately 18 years of my life in prison or jail. So I've had lots of consequences, and I still couldn't get out of it. And here's the thing is that, you know, okay, so I went into this hole where, you know, I'm starting to do these other things to maintain, you know, like you said, like maybe bills or things that I had to pay for. Well, slowly but surely that all went away too. I didn't care about the rest of it anymore. I stopped caring. My drug addiction became not only from daily, but hourly sometimes, just constant. Like that was all there was. You know, I no longer cared if I even had a place to live or clothes to wear. It wasn't about that anymore. And when did that point happen? It's hard to say. I know that there was a period of time where I went from managing, there's the air quotes, managing my addiction to suddenly completely out of control.
Right.
And when I hit that point, I don't know I don't know how anybody could have ever gotten to me. Right. At that point, it was I was lost in a way that maybe it's that I didn't think I could be found.
Right.
But I was lost to the point where something significant had to happen. And in recovery, we talk about rock bottom.
Yeah.
People have to hit rock bottom. But what does that mean to anybody? To anybody else, I have no idea, because we all have different rock bottoms.
Well, and I guess that's where kind of maybe understanding the individual, the individual nature of addiction, because how each one starts, there's, like for you just grew up in a home where this stuff was acceptable.
Right.
When you were sharing that part, I was thinking about my own. I grew up in a Christian home. Mom and dad were ministry leaders in the church, but even then, we love coffee. So when people found out that I was a 9-year-old drinking coffee, this is back in the early 90s, to kind of betray how young I am, they were just like, "You drink coffee and you're 9?" Well, yeah, it's what we do in my house. We drink coffee, and so there's something about just the environment you grew up in that does shape you on what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And so you kind of grew up with that, and that's your story on this was acceptable or at least allowed. But that's your story, and so you grew up in that environment, and so other people have different origins. I know of a pastor who was never in drugs and was ministering, and then he helped an addict, and they left their drugs in his car, and he, instead of giving over to the law like he should have, he had a really bad week, and he says, "I wonder what this would feel like," and he took a hit, and that's where it started for him, which started a big downward spiral for him, and it turned in from a way of self-medicating stress to a full-blown addiction. Right. And he had to go through an extensive recovery and restoration process because of what it did to him. And so it is different, like you say, for each person. And I think recognizing the difference in origin also impacts the difference in rock bottom. Because some people, rock bottom is, I'm going to be evicted, or I'm going to go through a divorce, and that can be their rock bottom. Other people's rock bottom is they're in a gutter in the street.
See, and I'm the kind of person where I will dig that hole so deep that I can barely reach the top before it's
Yeah.
But I was gonna. So one of the other things that seems to come up is that I've been asked is, well, why did you even try that?
Right.
I don't know, because I'm an addict, and because as an addict, I'm gonna try whatever makes me feel good.
Right.
And that's not. I'm not trying to make light of that, but I'm just saying, I was trying to fix something in myself.
Right.
With something that made no sense, and wasn't going to fix it, but it would cover it.
Right.
I didn't have to feel it. I didn't have to think about it, and because there's just so I got into this cycle, and once I was in that cycle, it was I didn't see a way out. I couldn't see it. It's kind of like, have you ever been on one of those? Well, they don't have them anymore, but the merry-go-rounds at a and you get going so fast that everything's kind of dizzying, but you can only focus in on the middle, because otherwise everything's a blur, or it's going to make you even more dizzy and you're going to get sick. Yeah. And that's what addiction is to me, is I'm so focused on that middle part that I'm not seeing everything else because it's dizzying.
Yeah.
My life was completely out of control. It was a complete mess.
Well, and I like what you said earlier, and I'm going to bring it back to that, your merry-go-round analogy as well, is I'm going to try whatever makes me feel good. And so you encounter other users of other substances, and they say, man, this will make you feel really good. And again, it comes back to, I'm going to focus on this because this thing over here is overwhelming and dizzying, and this over here is just overwhelming and just makes it's a lot of input, and you're like, I just want to feel good. I just want to feel, even if it's temporary, I want to just, put myself in a place where I've got no feeling, and focus on that central spot.
Right.
Does that make sense? I guess I just want to listen.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, what it makes sense to me. I mean, and that's kind of what I was saying. It's just that you get so focused. Your focal point becomes, how can I not feel?
Mm-hmm.
How can I feel better?
Right.
How that's where I personally was like, well, this is the only thing that I can think of. This is the only thing that does me right. And the truth of the matter is it just made things worse. Yeah. And as an addict, you don't know. When I was in active addiction, I didn't notice. I didn't see that in that way. I didn't, at a certain point, it didn't even become about feeling good. It became about feeling normal.
Right.
Because suddenly I was so full into it that without it, I couldn't even have a real conversation sometimes.
And that's a really great point too, because it's like, I want to feel normal. But the problem is again, talking about addiction being that great deceiver, is your normal is that inebriated state. Your normal is so distorted. Right. It's the substances, whether it's the drugs or even the opioids or the alcohol. All those things are like, that's supposed to be your normal. Which is really funny because I've talked with, I've been in youth ministry for over 15 years. And so I've talked with teenagers all across the nation. And one of the things that has come up that I've heard in the past from a teenager is that the normal for their parent is drunk, and that they're more scared when their parent is sober than when their parent is drunk. And I mean, this is the lie that kind of comes in. And so for individuals to be like, yes, this is that desire for normalcy means I need to have a drink. I need to have that shot. I need to take that pill. Whatever it is, I need to snort. Whatever the use is, in order for me to have normal, I've got to go in that direction. Which can make it really hard. Which is,
when you think about it, is ridiculous, because being high, you're definitely not normal. Right. Or being drunk or whatever it is. There's no normal to that, and it just is. So I just think that someone who's in active addiction, and if you're dealing with that, don't let it be normal. I mean, don't let it be normal in your life. Right. I don't know what you can do to the addict to make, like, you can't force a bottom for them. You can't, right. But in order for you to remain healthy in your life, you have to look at things from a real perspective. You can't just, you can't continue that cycle with that addict.
Right.
Because it doesn't help the addict, doesn't help you, and it's not going to help anybody else.
Yeah. Well, it's like, going back to them not want, they have to want to help themselves. And I'm gonna use a person drowning as an example for that. I mean, and that's a very appropriate illustration. If I, they're in the water, and so but then you have somebody on a boat or on the dock or whatever, and they're throwing that. They've got that life raft with the string on it. And they're throwing that hoop out there to save them, and the person's not reaching for it. They're not swimming towards it. You can even bonk them in the head with it, and if they don't grab onto it themselves and do their part, there is no going to be saving of that life. There has to be a part where they realize, I'm drowning, I need help. And then when the life vest comes, when the life ring comes out there, they're cognizant enough that they need help, and so they're going to reach for that. But that's got to be them. You can't make them take a hold of that.
They basically have to be at a point where the water's getting in their lungs and they just can't do it no more.
Yeah. Hence the rock bottom statement that you were saying earlier.
You know, and so kind of into the history part, you know, I'm, you know, my story's different than others, but we all kind of have the same story. And, you know, in the story, the moral story of it is that we did not have control.
Right.
Just didn't, you know, and like I was talking to Byron earlier, and he was like, well, it's because we couldn't make that choice, or we didn't make that choice. Whereas now in recovery, you start to see that, you know, I was choosing to be that addict, but you know, but then again, I wasn't, you know, like right. I didn't choose to be an addict, but at a certain point, because there was a point where I wanted out.
Right.
I wanted out. There were several times where I just wanted out. I wanted it to stop. But then I would make the choice to go get high. Mm-hmm. You know, and you know, I would let that thought pass. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, it's just, you know, and I got, you know, I just wish I could. For me, I wish there was a way to find that addict when they're in that moment, you know. But how do you do that? Yeah. You just don't know. Well, and because I was probably in a basement smoking dope and thinking, God, I'm just so tired of this. I want out.
Right.
You know, well, you're not going to show up at that basement. You probably don't even know where I'm at. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the hard part too. You know, like last week we talked about what is one of the steps the church can take is to see them in their place. But then there's that crutch moment where they're asking themselves that question, I want out, what do I do? But they're doing that in a place that really honestly we can't see. They're doing, like you said, like in a basement.
Right.
You know, no one's going to show up in that basement.
Right. And that's, okay, so that kind of brings me to the whole point of what my whole thought process on this is that if we stop pretending like this doesn't happen, pretending like this is not a problem, if we stop that and we start to actually put like your tentacles out and everybody kind of just stops the lies and the secrets and everything else, you know, there's it's almost like there's no hiding, and it also gives that addict the idea, okay, you know, there are people out there, I've seen it. Right. You know, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, yeah, well, there's got to be some kind of connection there. Where
so I'm gonna go back to the drowning analogy in regards to this, and when I give this analogy, when I explain this scenario, it'll make sense. But you know, basically, when we recognize that someone could potentially be a user, we go to this point where we treat them like a toddler around a pool with no fence. Where here's this toddler, and they're getting close, and so we're gonna make sure. No, I'm gonna make sure that you don't fall in the water. I'm gonna make sure that you don't I'm watching you to make sure that you don't go into that drowning state. Right. You know, and that's hard because, you know, I mean, do we like that helicopter style? And I'm not saying like being like a helicopter parent, right. but that idea of, hey, I know so-and-so is having issues with this substance, and I did not see them today. So I'm going to go check on them. I'm going to go call them. And so now it goes to that where I'm actively trying to intercede on them. I'm going to them. I'm like, okay, they're getting close to the water. Where are they? Did they fall in? I'm going to go find them. I'm going to make sure. I'm going to keep my eye on them to make sure that they're... Does that make sense now? And you kind of see where it's like that.
Well, and that not only that, so using that analogy, being one person trying to watch that one is fine, but at the pool you have a bunch of parents.
There's got to be,
and
a
they're
community.
always watching.
Yeah.
And so that's my whole thought process in all this is as a community, can we do better? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, that's the problem, is I don't have solutions. I don't know. I only know what worked for me, like I told you last week. But I think that if we can get the community to also be a participant in this process, and the only way to do that is maybe to give them some understanding, and to give them a thought process on it. Who knows what can happen? But I know that as one person, I can't do a lot.
Right.
But you put hundreds of people into it, and something can happen.
Well, and I love what you said about the communities at the pool.
Right.
So it's like yes, hey, I know of so and so, they know of so and so. You let me know when this happens, or there's that community watch, and that the idea is, and what I'm hearing in this too is why, if I were to take the perspective of the addict, why didn't, if I'm living in this community, why didn't anyone search for me? Why didn't, if everybody's watching me, who was going to tell me that they loved me? Who is going to be the one that comes and pulls me out of this mess and does something? It is what I hear, especially with all eyes on us.
And the tricky part is kind of like what you said, is that person actually has to be at a point where they're like, and maybe it could, if you feel like you're being pushy, don't worry about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because in the end, you might be saving somebody's life, and if that means that you have to feel a certain way because you've been pushy, okay.
One of the men, he passed away many years ago, but one of the men who has written many books and has led a church and founded several ministries, David Wilkerson, he wrote a book, The Crossing the Switchblade, and Crossing the Switchblade is a wonderful book, and it tells the story of his relationship and how he moved to New York City to reach the youth gangs that are there. And that man, as he tried to reach people in drug addiction, as he tried to reach gangs, just as a minister on his own, he was shot and stabbed and beaten just by being that persistent, just trying. And one of the men that he was able to save is Nicky Cruz. And Nicky Cruz is an evangelist now, amazing minister, but he was a New York City gang leader, and just did not want. He fought against Wilkerson, just violently fought against what Wilkerson was doing, and but Wilkerson's persistence paid off in the end. Right. And I think that's a point, is you're right, is hey, don't matter for being pushy, just stay on top of me until I see it.
And there, you obviously have to be thick-skinned for, because not only because so for me personally, I probably would have berated that person with insults or fuck, excuse my language, but fuck you, I'm not doing this, and so you have to be thick-skinned about it, right? But the reality is that if you don't even try,
right.
Because I can tell you that I personally wasn't going to try.
Yeah.
Being in my addiction, I wasn't going to reach out to you.
Yeah.
Like literally, the only person that reached out to me that changed my mind or that finally got me was the police department. They reached out and said, "You're coming with me." I personally would like to see something different happen, and I don't think that the police department or the judges or the parole officers or or the leaders in the community want it to be like that. I maybe some do. I don't know. I don't care. But
they have their job. that they're supposed to do, and they're
but they don't want it to be like that.
No, and
especially it's different when somebody's just doing things just to be a complete jackass.
Right.
An addict, it would be nice if they could have a little better understanding of what who an addict is or what an addict is, so that they might have some kind of compassion. I know you can't just overlook their behavior, but if some compassion to maybe start a different way.
And that's the hard.
So much to it.
That's the hard part. Well, because by the time you get to the law enforcement, their job is to uphold the law and hold accountability.
Right.
But if we can take steps prior to that, we absolutely should. To make their job easier. I mean, they're coming from a place where they've had to deal with the roughest of the rough. And they have to make decisions.
Maybe you can just take them to a meeting.
Yeah, well,
and sit there and wait for them.
Some of their decisions.
Gotta be something.
Yeah, and some of the decisions that they make are based off of fear, or uncertainty. They're going into a high stress environment, and they're wound tighter on edge than anything. But if we can mitigate that, if we can take steps, like I said, steps ahead of time, where going back to that pool and saying, hey, this is becoming a thing. Let's stay on top of that. When Wilkerson was first drawn to New York City, it was because he saw 6 teenage boys going up to the courthouse, getting arrested for what they had done in the city streets. Right. And that's what spurred him in to go and minister to the gangs. And ministering to the gangs of New York, that's what birthed the Ministry Teen Challenge. And until he handed that off to other capable leaders. But and so seeing that there's the different roles that are brought about in that is huge. And I think definitely having that grace and understanding, like you said, and that's why I value that you shared your story, because that kind of we need to, for lack of a better word, I think we need to humanize the addicts. Yeah. We need to humanize those individuals, because I think sometimes we see them as monsters instead of as fallen people, and that's one thing I think that if we instead of looking at them as monsters to be ostracized and cast away, and instead see them as fallen individuals who are making terrible choices that need grace and understanding, and yes, because if we're going to transform lives, it does mean accountability, but to see them as somebody who needs to be a recipient to bring the church into this, to be the recipient of God's loving kindness and forgiveness, as opposed to the monster that needs the judgment.
So in order for that to happen, you would have to look past the destruction and addict causes, because I will say I have made destruction in the lives of everybody around me in some way, shape, or form, and so you would have to look past that, and that's where the grace I think would come in. It because now those people who were like, God, he's a monster, just don't want him in my life, blah blah blah. Now in recovery, those people are very involved in my life, and are just don't, like, even to this day, they don't understand how different of a person that I am, but they like it, and so if I guess if you can, a little grace would be nice, but I'm still on that. It's so messy with an addict. There's so much involved in it. There's, and going back to that pool analogy, if you happen to turn your head for a minute, as an addict, I'm going to run into that pool and I'm going to try and jump in the deepest part, knowing I can't swim. But having a community there who is all watching, somebody might snatch me up by my arm
Yeah.
and be like, no, you're not jumping in
done.
the deep end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not even that they snatch me. It'd be like, they could yell at me, you know, hey, get out, you know, stop there or whatever. And, you know, and it might stop me from jumping into that. You know, it might not. Yeah, I'm not saying, you know, that there's a cure-all. I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, for me, I feel like if the community is just stops feeling like they can't do anything,
right?
Because I feel like that's what's being said. No, we can't do anything. It's for the police department and the judges and all that to take care of. No, this is your community.
Yeah. Well,
this is where you live. These are the people in your lives. You know, why would you not want to participate in making your community better? Your own life will become better.
Right.
You know, why not try to figure, you know, that's where I'm at with all of this. It's just, and I can't say it enough. I'm tired of seeing the deaths and you know, and it's not even just the deaths. You can look in the paper and I can guarantee you that 9 out of those 10 crimes that happen are addiction related.
Yeah.
That's what, you know, and that one that isn't probably is. We just don't know for sure. You know what I mean? Because it's hidden well. You know. So honestly, I'm just at a point where I want better for my community. Yeah. Because, you know, and the only way that I can do that for me is to just maybe give them a line of sight as to what, you know, to an addict. Yeah. You know, and hopefully someone can take something somewhere, you know, and I wanted to get to the trigger part. Mm-hmm. So that's the other part is you can't, you know, don't tippy-toe around an addict. Right. You're not going to help them that way.
You know.
Right. You know. So they're going to have triggers no matter what. There are triggers that happen. I still occasionally have a trigger. Mm-hmm. You know, the best thing that you can do is learn what a trigger is. Right. Learn not necessarily just theirs, but learn what a trigger is and learn what's the best course of action to help that person through that trigger.
Because the goal is that it eventually no longer becomes a trigger.
There are a lot of triggers that have disappeared in my life.
Yeah, yeah, because that's the goal. There's these trigger moments. They exist. Let's not beat around the bush. There's these things like, hey, that's gonna make me crave a drink. If I can be so blunt, that's gonna make me crave a hit. Right. You know, whether you smell something or somebody says something, like those are gonna be major triggers. And so we have to recognize those things because, especially in my mind, what I perceive is that the earlier you are in recovery, the stronger and more prolific triggers are. You know, but the whole goal is that eventually you become strong enough that those triggers are no longer an issue or completely non-existent for you.
Well, okay. Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, that changes for you, and your triggers are different, or you know, or they lessen the power in them lessons. But I is not what really happens. Mm-hmm. It's a community of addicts in the program. I feel like so I couldn't have gotten through a lot of the stuff that I did without them. Right. They were my backbone, and you build that as you go through your program, right? Or as you get more and more clean time, you build relationships with people who are in recovery. You build through the steps. You build through your sponsor. Mm-hmm. You know, which I'm not sure if anybody knows what that is, but you know, you build through all these avenues that are given to you, these tools that are given to you. You eventually start to build all of that, and the thing is that in recovery, I could have never done this alone.
Right.
Never. It just wouldn't have happened. And that's kind of the point I wanted to get across to in this whole whatever it is that we're is that it's not your responsibility, but we can't do it alone.
Right.
So, and you don't have to be in the program,
I guess,
to be a support system.
As your support system grows, like an army, your force, your squadron, your strength grows by the amount of people with you, as you spend that time together, shared stories, shared journey, shared purpose, if we can, and that strengthens you as things progress.
Right.
Which is really fun, because in Hebrews chapter 10 it says that as you see the end of times approaching, that the church should not give up meeting together, but as we see a certain day approaching, that we need to gather together all the more. And the idea is that there's something that strengthens people when we gather around one another. Whether it's the encouragement in these final days, whether it's coming alongside addicts or recovery, just whatever the process is there's something important about that groups coming together, connection, being together. And I think that's one of the things that, looking back, it's 2023 right now, and back 3 years ago in 2020, I think that's one of the things that really kind of what COVID, when we went through the COVID pandemic, really revealed about us, is when that pandemic hit, a lot of users increased. A lot of people relapsed. And it was because of that isolation that we had to go through. And just the stress, the isolation, the fear, the removal of normal, all of those things were gone, and it created this mess. And so what COVID revealed to us is that we are a people who need community. We are a people who need to come together and to support one another.
That's actually a really good point, that I hadn't really thought about, is that when everything was isolated and kind of, not in everybody's purview or sight, things increased.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me now that that's what we're doing, is we're trying not to do that. We're trying to make it so that it's in your sight.
Right.
And it's and that you do make those connections and have that communication and just care. Care enough. If you can't care about the addict, care enough about yourself that you want to make something better for your life by just giving.
Yeah.
That, I don't know what you need to, just a little love.
Yeah.
Goes a long ways in life. And that's one of the things I'm discovering in my own recovery, is that just that process of just giving to somebody who's in need of help. I don't know if they're, I don't know what they're going through. I don't know how they're feeling. I don't, but it doesn't matter. It's like, hey, here you go.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying expose yourself to some kind of, harm or manipulation or whatever.
Right.
I'm just saying, it's okay to go into something and be caring enough to just help and then move on.
Yeah.
You don't even have to think about it again.
Yeah.
But
we're and I agree.
Yeah,
we're gonna conclude this here.
Yeah, we're getting
but
kind of long.
This is a long one. If you stuck through to this part, hey, thank you so much. But it's really good conversation. But it is true. I want to kind of wrap up this part with, we don't want to open ourselves up to harm when we approach these things, and that some people have been the hurt, really scarred victims of those who have been addicts. And I think we want to make sure that we do protect them, because they're in a sensitive place in their own journey. And so, so having those protective things, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we are reaching and being that community to all those. And so it is one of those things where maybe we'll have to talk about what can we do to reach and to love those in recovery and the addicts. but at the same time also protect those who are going through their own harm. Because I think sometimes what happens is the hurt and the harm and the fear of being hurt again, it does stop people from responding to those who need to be responded to. Right. And there's got to be a great way, and this might be something we need to think about before we even approach this subject, is there's got to be a great way to respect and honor both sides so that the healing can occur. But that's going to take time, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Well, and to me, the way you respect it both is you just put it out on the line.
Yeah.
Just honesty. Honesty is going to be the key to everything. Yeah. We just have to be honest with reality. Yeah. Because I think there are a lot of people who think they're in reality, and they think that, that, well, I'm just, no, let's just, again, I'm at that point where it's just like, let's just stop with the secrets. Let's stop with the lies. Let's just deal with this on whatever level that has to be.
Yeah. Stop. Stop hiding it. Yeah. And be real and give what you have. Yeah. Is what I'm hearing. So. Yeah. Yep. Thank you so much for joining us. We will come back again with another great discussion, and this is just wonderful. So thank you so much.